This segment of the podcast is sponsored by Traveling Nice Experiences, here to help you create new memories one experience at a time. Contact Traveling Nice Experiences at www.travelingniceexperiences.com to book your summer 2021 travel. Once again, that's www.travelingniceexperiences.com. We're ready to help you create your next memorable experience.
Previously on the What a Word podcast.
There are definitely things that people have not even begun to tell, or they've only told the people in their immediate environment, or someone hasn't asked the question yet that's gonna, trigger that particular story to be shared. So, and I think that that's a very important thing that, with the prevalence of social media, we are writing things down, but we're not memorializing them, I think, in the way that will really impact history. So I'm really hoping that people will journal this experience, whether it's through methods like this, through podcasts, or writing articles or writing posts, or actual journaling or blogging or whatever. I think we really need to capture this experience and try not to forget.
You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview-style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Sharp. It's great to be back for the first installment of season 2. I missed y'all. I really, really did. And I'm honored that you would welcome me back into this space. As you heard from the recap, my assignment has expanded. Not only am I having conversations with people who are sharing life challenges and faith, but I'm also entrusted with documenting experiences over time. So you heard last season a lot of conversations that had to do with our reactions to what was happening in terms of the pandemic, not only the health pandemic, but the racial pandemic as well. I promise to continue to share words that will lift your spirits. My guest today is, I can tell you, man, I'm excited about this conversation. Pastor Eddie Hypolite spoke to me about 15 plus years ago. Now, mind you, I was a part of an audience, but I connected with his story, his passion, the urgency with which he spoke, and his relatability. And I'm honored to have him here. I thought I made some assumptions about his life, to be honest with you. And I read his book, Living from Here, and that book amplified for me the challenges he dealt with as a teenager. At 14, a teacher deemed him uneducable. Now, I've never said that word before or read it prior to seeing it in his book. Uneducable is a teacher's way of saying, Mom, Dad, give up. Your child has no hope or promise or prospects in mainstream education. Now, how does Pastor Eddie Hypolite go from being deemed uneducable to being an author, a motivational speaker, an educational consultant, and a leadership and personal development trainer? His life is sprinkled with grace, and we are going to discuss that today. Now, he has a powerful book called Living from Here. And that book tackles tough topics such as manhood, authenticity, resilience, sex, relationships, truth, and struggle, using a blend of practical wisdom, good old common sense, and lots of personal experience. It is an engaging walk through a life shared for the benefit of those who seek the resilience to make the most of themselves and ultimately wish to start living from here. Pastor Eddie Hypolite has trained and inspired leaders and organizations from Johannesburg to Tokyo, from South Central LA to South London, and from Helsinki to Melbourne. He has worked as a minister of religion for the past 20 plus years in both the UK and Australia and has an academic background in theology and sociology. He currently lives with his family in New South Wales, Australia. Please join me in welcoming my first guest for season 2, Pastor Eddie Hypolite.
Welcome, Pastor. Did I pronounce your name right?
Hypolite, yeah.
Hypolite,
yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Perfect.
So as I indicated to you, I came across your ministry probably a number of decades ago. It had so much impact on me, hearing you convey your heart to an audience comprised mostly of youth and young adults. James Black, who was the North American youth ministry director at that time.
Yeah, him and
organized.
Manny Cruz together.
Yep.
That dynamic duo.
Impactful event. So I was trying to reconcile just your work with what I learned about you, that at 14, you were deemed uneducable.
Mm. Yeah, I used to get into a lot of problems at school. I came to realize later the problems wasn't that I was uneducable. It was they just didn't have the patience to really deal with a kid who absorbs a lot of information and is very restless. You know, so once I absorbed all that information, and I absorbed information very quickly, I was just restless, and so I was disruptive. And you know, we was dealing with a education system at the time that just didn't have no patience for young black boys, young Irish boys. So they used to declare both of us uneducatable. I remember the day that lady told my mom, Mrs. Hypolite, the problem with Eddie is that he's uneducatable. Yeah. And but you know, I went on later to understand. Actually, I came out of, I was expelled from regular high school, and I ended up in a community homeschool, and I was placed there by the court, by the courts for, it was a community homeschool, a reproved school for young, I suppose, juvenile delinquent boys. I ended up in the engineering, and you didn't get an education there, you got a trade. I ended up in the engineering workshop of a man called Cliff German, Mr. German. And I remember he gave me this piece of work to do. And I went to him about 15 minutes later. And I said, sir, I've finished. He said, no, you're not finished yet. I said, no, sir, I've finished. And he came, he looked at my work and he went, oh, all right. And then he gave me a piece of work that lasted the whole period. You know what I mean? Because he realized quick, all right, you absorb information quick and you get it quick. Okay, let me give you something that is going to challenge you. And he was the first one to really make me understand my capacity for information and learning. And as a matter of fact, he stayed in my life until he passed about 10 years ago. He passed of cancer, you know, so he just stayed a permanent fixture as a teacher, then as a friend and as a mentor, you know, even once I left school. And then I found him again in my 20s and we just remained friends, Yeah.
So you had the aptitude.
Yeah,
sure.
I always had the aptitude.
Even before that designation.
Even before that designation, I just wasn't in a school system that had the patience. you know. And then at the same time, I mean, like, I was just too enough. I was just too, and inner, you know what I mean? You know, for anybody who don't know what inner mean, it's just like, if there's anything going on, Eddie's in it. He's just in it, you know. And so, yeah, but I always had the aptitude. I've always had the aptitude. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't go back to education until I was 25. At 25, I went back to community college to do, as it were, high school equivalents.
Wow.
Out of it. And so that's why I've always said when I'm doing educational consultancy, when I'm in schools and in tertiary institutions, I always say, listen, it doesn't matter when you start. What matters is that you start. Yeah, it doesn't matter when you start. What matters is that you start. And so I started at 25. And then I went on from there to become a residential social worker. And then I did my first degree. And then after that, subsequently did two different master's degrees in two different disciplines. And then write and so I've always had the aptitude. It just wasn't seen, and it wasn't nurtured in a regular school system. You know.
So your roots, Fulham, West London, is that where your formative
Fulham.
years?
Yeah, Fulham, born and bred, London born, London bred, London fed, London wed. Yeah, family came from Grenada, the tiny spice island, 1960. I think 1959, 1960 they came up. And so the last three of us were all born in London.
Wow.
Last three children, all boys, were born. But I'm the youngest of 10, 8 living. And so yeah, my roots are Fulham, West London. Fulham, West London. Yeah.
And your family, your book talks about a strong mother and some estrangement with them. Could you unpack that for listeners?
Yeah, my dad left when I was 5. Left for the last time when I was 5. You know, I'm in a very big family, so there's a history in Grenada, then there's a history in England. You know what I mean? There's a history with my mother before Jesus met her, and then the history of my mother after Jesus met her, like literally before Christ and after Christ, you know. So my dad left when I was 5, and I suppose left for the last time when I was 5, or finally left, and never came back into the home again, never came into the marital home. You know, he was close enough to be seen, but never close enough to be present. And so we were just like raised by that mother. You know, we was raised by mom, you know, that Caribbean, godly, beautiful, love you like a mother, beat you like a father woman. You know, we was raised by her, you know. And so yeah, she filled in. I didn't know that I missed my dad. I didn't know that my dad was a missing fixture. One, because I suppose he left when I was that young, and 2, because I was from such a big family, you know. And so by the time I was 5, nieces and nephews were being born. So we grew up with all these other nieces and nephews. So the family unit was big, and mom was the hub that kept all the older siblings. Everyone lived in West London, except one of my sisters who lived in South London. So our proximity to each other, you know, we always, mom was the galaxy, and we was all just, you know, in her galaxy. She was the sun, and we all we all revolved around her. So I didn't know that I missed my dad. I think I understood what it meant to not have a father once I came to be married, you know, and that was at 28, you know, 27, because I got married 2 days before my birthday. And so that's when I came to really understand what it meant, or what not having a father actually meant to me, you know what I mean? in terms of the anxiety that it produced in me. You know.
And I want you to touch on your dad's counsel, which you received differently when you heard it, and then later on, came to
Yeah.
maybe appreciate a little more.
Yeah. My dad's counsel was stand your ground, fight your battles like a man. You know, that was the counsel that he gave me on at the engagement party. You know, both our families came together, and his counsel was to stand your ground and fight your battles like a man, which I dutifully, thanked him for, and said, yes, Dad, I would, and but in the privacy of my mind, I kissed my teeth. Privacy of my mind, I just kissed my teeth like what? Like you did for us. Chop on you, man. Ain't no one listening to you, man. Like about stand your ground, fight your battle like a man. Ain't no one got no time to hear you, But obviously I'm in public, and so, and I'm wise enough, I'm black enough to know, yeah, you can think it, but don't you dare say that. Somebody would have snatched my life in that room, one of my older siblings. But it wasn't until about 15 years into our wedding, into our marriage, that I understood what he was saying. And the counsel that he was giving me was basically, listen, I know who you are because I know who I am. And I know the me that is in you. And I know the way that I've always dealt with it. And it's going to come up in you. And my dad's way of dealing was not dealing. My dad's way of dealing was distancing, And so we had come in our marriage, we never had I don't call it a 7-year itch. We had a 15-year rupture. And we was heading down the road of indifference, and yeah, his counsel came back to me, and I finally understood what he was saying. He was saying, stand your ground, love this girl, don't leave, be better, be more, And so, yeah, it was and I didn't realize the importance of having him around as the male from whom I came, and I think that's what most young boys miss with their fathers. As much as they miss the presence, what they actually miss is their fathers helping them to make sense of themselves. Why am I like this? Why do I approach it in this way? It's their fathers helping them to understand what they've inherited, what's passed down. Their fathers helping them to understand how they break the cycle in their generation. That's how fathers help their sons to be better men and better fathers, by helping them to come to terms with where they are, and then understanding what's passed down in my generation. This is where it stops, but some of it leaks over, and this is what's leaking over into you, but that's where you stop it. And I think that's what sons miss. That's why sons chase their fathers so much. You know what I mean? And then at the same time, because sons are delicate. I mean, we've been socialized into thinking that we're not delicate and we're not emotional and we're not soft. We're human, and humans are all those things, male and female. We just express it in different ways. And sons need their fathers as much as daughters need their fathers, And so, yeah.
Powerful, powerful. Your book is heavy on introspection. Did some of that come from your own soul searching, some therapy even?
Brother, funnily enough, I've never had therapy. It always feels like trauma is my therapy, and being honest about where I am as a result of it. I've and I say it in my book, of all the people that I find it hardest to lie to, I find it hardest to lie to myself. You know what I mean? I may deny, but I never lie. You know what I mean? I may ignore, but I've never sat comfortably with lying to myself about where I am, So a lot of the introspection, and introspection is horrible. I may fight introspection, but in the end, I'm always sucked back to it because I always have a sense of not sitting comfortably in my own soul. And I want to be able to sit comfortably in my own soul. I want to be able to sit comfortably in the way I see myself, what I'm struggling with, why I'm struggling with it. You know, and so, yeah, it does focus a lot on introspection. Not everything can be solved by introspection. And I talk about that in the book, but nothing would be solved if you ain't brave enough to at least take a look. You know, sometimes you go back into the past, you dig up some bones and you realize, nah, there ain't nothing to be found here. Let me bury this and just leave it and just move on. But sometimes you won't know until you are at least brave enough and strong enough and resilient enough to at least take a look back, you know. But you develop that strength in the present so that you can do that. If you consistently live in the past, you won't find the strength in the present to do that. If you consistently live in the future, you won't be able to find the strength. You know, you have to be present with yourself so that you can reach back and you can hope forward, you know, because we're constantly in that same space. You know, we're constantly looking to the future. We're constantly reflecting on the past, but it's the present that enables us to navigate both spaces. You know, and so for me, I've learned to just be comfortable with the uncomfortable nature of introspection. You know, and not really business what people think. You know, at my age now, I'm like, listen, I lost my mom last year, last October.
My condolences, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
My condolences.
You know, 95. She just had a good innings.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she was ready. She was like literally ready, and we just had to realize that we had to stop being selfish with her presence. You know, she had health issues, and so the whole family. You know, this birthday in next week will be next week. My birthday next week will be the first birthday that I am conscious of having without my mum being around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because she had me at 40. So I've always, you know what I mean?
Sure.
When I turned, I've just veered off a little bit, but I'll come back. When I turned 50, I said, Mum, you're turning 90. She said, oh gosh, boy, who want to be them old ages? So, oh gosh, you know, so like, I said, Mum, look, let me turn 50, you turn 90, then you can die whenever you want. Oh, we laugh. But then she held on 5 more years. But the one thing that I discovered with Mum in her later years, like, you know, from 80 moving forward, my mum traveled lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. You know what I mean? In terms of people who were doing her wrong. And, you know, I would like, Mum, why you have these people around you? You know? And she's like, Pastor. You know what I mean? She's like, Pastor, you know? And my mum continued to, like, she would forgive them and they would come. But in the end, you know what was happening, right? Her light was being too much for them. In the end, they couldn't be around her anymore because her light and her goodness, they just couldn't navigate in that orbit. It showed up the real people that they were, and they left. You know, and she just taught us how to travel light. So the older I get, you know, one thing that introspection is doing for me is just empowering me to travel light. And travel light by stop thinking about people and thinking about what people think of you, and thinking about it because they're not people who think about you. So why are you worrying about what they think of you? They don't think about you. So, you know, go to the people that truly know you, truly love you, and find out what they think about you, because they're thinking of you. They're the ones who wake up in the morning and pray for you. They're the ones that drop you the text. They're the ones that you said something to, and then a week later, they chase you up. Yeah, look, so how you doing with this? I'm just chasing you up. You know, what's happening? think about them. But people who don't, people don't think of you, don't worry about what they think about you, because they're not thinking about you. They're just not.
So you and I have a certain cultural connection, and I think it's been amplified recently by the offerings of the Steve McQueens,
Mm.
who delicately illustrates the Caribbean influence in London. And I want to ask you about what you learned about your own parents' history being in West London, um, against the backdrop of a small axe and a top boy. How much of that connects with your own history?
Well, the beauty of um, the um, the beauty of Steve, and I actually don't say it publicly, but I'll say it with you. Actually, this will be the first time I've actually said it publicly. We're cousins. We're second cousins. Yeah. We're second cousins.
Really?
Yeah. We're second cousins.
Nice.
So everything that he's doing there is it's beautiful. It's interesting. I was the one with the Mangrove 9. Yeah. There have been 4 people that have had profound effects on me educationally. One was Cliff German. Yeah. One was a professor called Olive Hemmings Painsel when I was in Jamaica at Northern Caribbean. One was Dr. E.L. Henry, my mentor when I came into ministry. But the second one after Cliff German was Barbara Bees, who was in, yeah, she was one of my educators. I ended up on a government youth opportunities. Back then in the 80s, it was called YOP, Youth Opportunities Program. And I ended up on a YOP coming out of detention center. I'd been in like youth. It was like a youth prison for teenagers at the time. And I ended
Was
up
Barbara the advocate in that episode for the young man's parents?
No,
Was that
Barbara Bees was, remember the one with the Mangrove 9? And she
okay? Gotcha.
the activist.
Gotcha.
Barbara Bees. Yeah, she was the partner of Darcus Howe. I ended up meeting her, and she became my educator, and she was the one who introduced me to Pan-Africanism. She introduced me to just Black thought and Black thinking. And while Mr. German locked my capacity for understanding, she was the one that unlocked my love of books. She would put books in my hands, and I would just read and read and read and read and read and read. So looking back on Steve's work, looking at his contribution to our journey, it's invaluable. It's invaluable because we have such an important part. It's a Caribbean community. It's a Caribbean community specifically that really created and influenced multicultural Britain as we understand it. The coming of the Caribbean community in after, 1948, 1947, 48, and then through the 50s, and then the mass migration during the 60s. That generation, the 50s and the 60s, they were the ones that really influenced multicultural Britain as we know it today. So looking at everything that Steve did there was just brilliant. When I looked at the one on education, I recognized it. You know what I mean? When I looked on the one with the Mangrove 9, and listening to the way they scripted the police talking, I listen, right? This man, Steve, literally transported me back to when I was like 13 and 14 and hearing police talk to me exactly like that. Like literally like that. I'm like, yeah, he didn't even make nothing up. Just the wording, everything, looking at Lover's Rock. Man, that was so good, man. That was so good. That was so good. Lover's Rock saved our lives in England. For those of us born and bred in Britain, Lover's Rock was such a major influence because it was our contribution. you know. Lovers and reggae reminded us that we were Black, reminded us that we were beautiful, reminded us that we had history. In the 70s, all the way through the 70s and the early 80s, Rastafari was to the Caribbean community what the Nation of Islam was to African Americans in the 60s, just in terms of grounding us in history and spirituality and music and beauty, and you know. So yeah, his work, it's you know, it will actually stand the test of time. You know, it will stand the test of time. And yeah, it was, yeah, all the way through everything. I've watched all of them now, and they were brilliant pieces of work, you know.
So your
Brilliant.
folks experienced the harshness of.
Oh my gosh. I didn't grow up with my dad. I lived with my dad for one time. And I remember for a little while, I remember we was driving through London, and my dad was just talking about, oh yeah. I worked on that building there. Yeah. We worked on this. We worked, just driving me through. And remember him talking about, I said, what was London like then? He said, you had to fight, go into work, fight at work, and fight coming from work, like physically fight. You know what I mean? You know, and we had the rollover of that. I remember in the 70s, growing up in the 70s, because I'm a 65 baby. So I remember growing up in the 70s in Fulham, having to run from skinheads. You run from skinheads and you run from police. Because if either one of them catch you, if they ain't killing you, they're leaving you within an inch of your life from a beating. You know, and in Fulham, we ran from skinheads until we was like, nah, I ain't running from no skinheads. And then in the end, skinheads were running from us. You know what I mean? We run them off the street, man. We run them off the street, you know. So yeah, we really did, you know, really did have a deep, you know, and it's a lot of parents don't talk about that period. You really have to pry it out of them. Because for a lot of them, you know, they came from the Caribbean with, you know, and they were children of empire. Our parents were children of empire. You know, the history that they learned was British history. They didn't learn no Caribbean history. They didn't learn African history. You know, my mom, her passport, I still have her passport. My mom's passport that she came from Grenada with is a British passport. It's a British passport, you know. So I think a lot of them don't talk about it because it didn't take them long to understand that England is a mother, but she ain't the mother you thought she was. Yeah. And so, you know, for that reason, you find a lot of them they don't talk about. But then there are others, man, they don't hide nothing. They don't hide nothing, you know. I was grateful that my mom spoke about it, spoke about the living conditions, spoke about the difficulties. Yeah, she spoke.
So young Eddie, because now you're a living, walking, breathing miracle. That designation as uneducable could have, it stripped you from mainstream education for some time. And you don't make any bones about the missteps and the setbacks.
No.
What was happening with young Eddie?
Oh man. Young Eddie was just absorbed with the street. Young Eddie was absorbed with, you know, he was absorbed with the street. He was absorbed with the things that young people absorb themselves with, you know, not the credibility, but the hype from their friends, you know, being a name, being a face. It was a time as well in which we were trying to eke out our own existence for who we were in England, you know. And so whether it be through sound system, whether it be through sports, the small spaces that we had, and then whether it be just through this, you know, England is, you know, I don't know if you've seen that film, The Italian Job, the original one with Michael Caine, and there's a song in there, And he says, this is a self-preservation society. England is a deeply self-preservation society. And as a, self-preservation society, it is a very dishonest society. I make no bones and I don't apologize for saying it. It's a very dishonest society that kind of hides behind British civility, but on a very basic level. And that doesn't mean that the people aren't good and you won't find, but running through, because the British system itself is a very dishonest system. So Eddie was just caught up in that in terms of, juvenile delinquency, juvenile crime, and getting involved in all of the stuff that he was getting involved with. He was trying to find himself, but he was finding himself in places where who he truly wasn't to be found, and who he truly could be wasn't to be found there. I saw glimpses of him, even during those bad periods, even during those wasted, being in youth detention, being in community homeschools, being taken out of my house and through the legal system, being placed in community homeschools where, you would only go home once a month, and then every couple of weeks. Then eventually after about a year, you go home every week. And then finishing school there. That's why I finished school with Mr. German. And, that's where I finished school. There were glimpses that I saw there. But I only really began, I'm talking about myself in the second person. I only really began to really see myself once I decided to define myself away from a construct that had only defined me in one way anyway. I think when you define yourself by what is taking place out on the street, on the road, in your areas, in the areas that we come from, that is a pre-cooked meal. That is a preset menu. That menu doesn't allow you to see yourself in any other way. And so it was only until I was able to look with eyes that had an alternative rather than an option. Because for me, an option is just a different choice of the same thing, but an alternative is a different choice altogether. And so I believe that, at 25, God gave me the alternative of viewing myself rather than just the option. And when I saw the alternative of viewing myself, he had given it to me at 17 and I stepped away from it at 19. But when he came back at 25, gave it to me again, I was convinced and convicted, I'm only going to be my full self when I allow myself to be seen from the alternative that God has given me, and not the option, and not just the option, which I've been living by all this time. And and once I did that, I'm here. This is, I've been living out of that, from young Eddie to this Eddie,
Are you enjoying the What a Word podcast and want to learn how to share it with others on social media? It's easy. Go on your favorite podcast app, find the What a Word podcast, and hit share. Please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you won't miss any episodes. And if this podcast has encouraged or inspired you, then please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps new listeners find us easier. Thank you.
Mom was always a Christian?
Mom was always, no, Mom was an Anglican. My dad was Catholic, my mom was Anglican. Okay. But Mom became a Christian when I was about 8. Yeah. Mom became Adventist.
Mhm.
You know, our faith background is Adventist. She became Adventist when I was about 8. Yeah, so we was raised in the Adventist tradition.
Did that tradition make room for the complete Eddie, the Eddie who liked Lovers Rock and Alton Ellis and Janet Kay
Nah,
and Jean
it didn't did
Adebambo?
it didn't do it then. Didn't do it. Doesn't do it now. You know what I mean? That tradition is a tradition that, you
Mhm.
know, it's the tradition that the missionaries taught. You know, it's the tradition that the missionaries taught, which is like akin to kind of like theological colonialism. You know, that doesn't allow for any expressions of Africanness, any expressions of historically who we are and who we've always been, and who we've had to be in order to basically survive the construct of white supremacy, which brought on slavery, which brought on colonialism, which brought on neo-colonialism, you know what I mean, which brought on all disenfranchisement, just everything. Adventism has never Adventism has never made space for that, because Adventism has always been taught from a Western construct model. You know, it always has been taught as a culture rather than just as a message. Because when you teach it as a message, when you teach it in its pure form as theology, it doesn't dismiss people's cultures. It doesn't rub away their music and their cultural expression and replace it with with a Western thing that says, yeah, this is what God prefers for you. You know, I pastored here at Avondale in Australia, Avondale University. I was this lead pastor for 4 years at the university church. And I remember speaking to them once and I said, you know, when people who look like you came to places where people who look like me lived, you never taught us the gospel, you taught us a culture. You taught us to be you. But what you never did was come back to us and say, listen, you see all those things that we taught you? You might need to rethink it, because we went back, tried it with our children, and none of them go to church anymore. So you might need to rethink it. I said, what you did was you taught us and you told us to hold on to that forever, while you went and broadened your thought, broadened your perspective. So now when people who look like me come to places where people who look like you live, we say that you've apostatized, that you've moved away from the faith because you never came back to us. You know what I mean? Anyway, about a week later, one of my members, because, you know, my community is an academic community. You know what I mean? It's like 99% white, you know, academics, professors, you know, past the present presidents of the university. Anyway, somebody who is like a very well-known but retired missionary came to me about a week later and he said, you know, I've been thinking about what you said last week. It's been troubling me all week. And he said, you know, Eddie, on reflection, we got it so wrong back then. And these were his exact words. He said, I wish we would have just taught people the gospel and left them to get on with it and left them to work it out, he said, and left them to work it out. I said, yeah. And so, yeah, the Adventism that I grew up in, and I grew up in Caribbean Adventism, but it was Caribbean Adventism that was taught by Western missionaries, you know, that was taught to them by white missionaries. So no, it never made no room for none of that. Now it makes room. Why? Because there's a whole new generation of us that have come as thinkers, as writers, as preachers, as academics, and we just realized, when I was doing my second master's, my first was in systematic theology, but my second was at Goldsmiths. I did it in sociology, communications, culture, and society, and then I realized, so that approach. So many people talk to me about music, and, I heard people stand up and chat in the church and talk about music, and I stopped them straight. They want to do this big talk. I said, you need to stop. Because what you're about to teach is called colonial racist theory. And they said, are you saying that I'm racist? I said, no. I'm saying what you're about to say is racist. And then I tell them, listen, this is what you're about to say. You're about to now talk about music. You're about to talk about beats. You're about to talk about rhythms. And then you're about to denigrate and trash and dismiss all music of African heritage and all the genres of music that have come out of that. And then what you're about to do is you're about to replace it with European music as the preferred music for understanding and connecting with God. Isn't that what you're about to do in this long hour and a half talk that you're about to give? That's where you're going, right? And they're like, they stop. And I'm like, that is called colonial racist theory. You know what I mean? That is cool. So now that you've got a whole new generation of thinkers that, and we make room, we understand, you know what I mean, that there is space to hear Gina the Bamboo sing, "You make my life such a paradise." You know what I mean? You need Alton Ellis singing, "You make me so very happy." You know what I mean? You need Freddie McGregor. "I'm a revolutionist, go away from there." We need all of it. You know what I mean? As much as we need. I must tell Jesus all of my trials. You know what I mean? Because Jesus is allowing himself to be found in all of those spaces. Jesus doesn't separate himself from the struggle attached to that music. He doesn't separate himself from the beauty, you know what I mean, attached from that cultural expression. Jesus's favorite culture is all cultures. You know what I mean? Because there is no pure culture. There ain't no pure culture. Yeah.
Oh, that's a word. What tensions did you experience? Because you, at a point, you were serving as a residential social worker. So within sociology, you probably saw, and I'm making a huge assumption here, you saw what led you off the path, because sociology makes room for the missteps and the setbacks and what informs it. But Christianity wasn't doing it for young Eddie.
It's what sociology does, it just has an honest opinion about who we are as human beings. What the Bible does is have an honest opinion about who we are as human beings. Read the stories. What organized religion does is ignore who we are as human beings. That's what organized religion does. Organized religion, you know what I mean, doesn't it refuses to see us as we are, but only wants to see us as we should be. You know what I mean? That's why it's constantly pointing out sin, pointing out, you know what I mean? And all right, fair enough. But how do you come to sit and be present with that person so that they can understand the depth of where they are? And so, being a social worker, being a residential social worker, working in the children's homes, because that's where I ended up working in children's homes. I actually wanted to go in and be of a residential social work. I wanted to go in and work in probation, be a probation officer and work with guys in the prison system, because I felt that I could make a difference there. But God was like, no, your life is for ministry. I want your life for the kingdom, So I suppose what I've always done, my approach to ministry has always been a refusal to not see life as it actually is. I think that has been my approach as far as ministry is concerned. No, we're not going to sit here wrapped in cotton buds and ignore what's actually happening. Because I'm still naive enough to believe that Jesus is able to give new thought, to give new approaches, to give new hearts, to give new minds. I honestly believe that that's what the work of the kingdom is. My work in ministry has always been defined by Paul's word to the Romans: don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That has always what from the day I came into ministry, that is what has informed and propelled me as a preacher, as a minister, you know, as a writer, as a thinker, you know, in all the things that I do. Yeah, don't be conformed, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's my approach to ministry. That's my approach to the culture in all the work that I do through resilience, etc., etc. It's always so. I think that's why that's always my approach. So I think that's why I spend a lot of time, and you picked it up so rightly, in introspection. You know what I mean? You can't renew your mind if you ain't willing to just sit honestly with what's taking place in your mind and what's spilling out into your life. You know, so I think that's how I've combined sociology and theology in that healthy way. I think there's space for both of them. You know, the gospel is found in social spaces all the time. The gospel is not found truly inside buildings where people are just kind of wrapping themselves in the gospel blanket and ignoring the pain of the world around them. You know, you didn't see Jesus do that. So I don't know how we're called to do that. I don't know how you're called to do that as a follower of Jesus. You know.
On one of many trips with mom, and I hope I'm not giving too much of the book away because I want my listeners to pick up Living from Here. I want to highlight though the way you take us through love. And I'll quote, nothing about love is altogether easy, and yet everything about love is essential and necessary. Mom tells you on one of the many trips, you say, Mom, do you still love me? I think mom has probably picked you up from every facility there
Every
is.
police station, yeah.
Yeah. And you say, Mom, do you love me? And mom says, yes, I'll always love you. But in this moment,
I don't trust you.
I don't trust you. What is it about love that required this patient writing on your part to get listeners to understand its complexity?
I think what we've done with love is we've turned love into just this kind of hormonal response, you know, that you blow hot and cold with, you know. And so you love the person, but then you use love to say, I love my phone, you know, and then you use love to say, I love the way the MMA fighter just slammed him to the deck. Like, what? All of that is love? You know, so I think what we've done, we've kind of washed love. Love is washed, you know what I mean? But there's nothing that is easy about love, because love is the greatest giving of ourselves. It's the greatest giving of ourselves. You can force somebody to hate you. You can force somebody to fear you. You can never force somebody to love you. Love is a conscious giving. You have to consciously give yourself to this person. So everything is difficult about love, because what love does is love loves enough to go further. Love loves enough to know, I can't help you. People don't understand that love knows when, yeah, my love isn't helping you. So the only way that I can show you love in this moment is to totally step away from you. The only way I can show you love in this moment is to let go and just you get on and live your life. You know what I mean? And when you're willing to come to yourself, I am still going to be your soft place to fall. But I'm just not, when you fall back, I ain't going to be standing there, because you don't have I realize that my love is not empowering you to make the decisions about yourself that needs to break the cycles that you find yourself in. And so, yeah, you know, love takes you further than you want to go, keeps you longer than you want to stay, makes you dig deeper than you want to dig, jump higher than you want to jump, you know, charges you more than you've got in your pocket to pay. And you have to consciously do that. So everything is difficult about love. But everything is so essential about love, because in love, you know, the deeper you go is the more you understand the depths of your humanity, the more you understand your strength, when you feel that you've gone down to sub-level 5, and then you're brave enough to get there and realize that you've got sub-level 8, 9, and 10 sitting there, but you had to be brave enough to get to sub-level 5. You just understand so much more things about yourself that empower not only just who you are and how you see yourself in the world, but empower your boundaries, the lengthening of your boundaries, the shortening of your boundaries, that empower you to say to people, yeah, you need to step out of my life and don't step back into it again. You know what I mean? Or empower you to say to people, you need to step into my life and you need to stay here and I'm going to be with you. Love will do that, because love is a principle. It's a value-driven principle by which you live. It's not just an emotional thing. You know what I mean? There'll be times when I know that I drive my wife mad. There's times when I know that I drive my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter. At the end of the day, they both still love me. There's times when they do the same, but love as the principle is always going to drive me back to them. It's always going to keep them deeply in the center. It's always going to make me create community around me, where they are safe and where the people who know me and the people that I can trust with myself and my journey and my story and my feelings and my vulnerabilities, that they are also safe in this place and they are nurtured in this space, and there is mutual, nurturing and there's reciprocity in this space. So yeah, it's for me that's the journey with love, and I think above all things, I think that's what my mom showed us. Mom said a lot without saying a lot. When mom did use words, she used them, she used them wisely. She used them, she used them specifically. And she showed us that. She showed us that, she showed us that.
How can we avoid, and you amplified it in the book, the path to indifference? Because you touched on that in the relationship context.
Yeah.
It may also be sobering for us as a faith community where the church is hemorrhaging, young people are leaving in huge numbers, and the church seems to be moving on with or without them. How can we avoid in this same context that path of indifference?
I think the only way that we can avoid it is to be honest about the fact that we do it, and sit and understand, well, why do you do it? Why do you love the message to the destruction of the people? Why do you love the message and the organization of the church so much that you leave no space to love the people? Because that's what Jesus said to the church in Ephesus. You know what I mean? The church in Ephesus, Jesus said, you love me to a fault. You protect the gospel. You drive out the Nicolaitans. He said, but I have one thing against you. You've lost your first love. And some people are looking at that and said, hold on, Jesus, I thought you said they love you. But when you go back and read the book of Ephesians, and you hear how Paul speaks to the church in Ephesians, to remember that Jesus has taken Jew and Gentile and made out and pulled them into himself and made one humanity, and Paul talks and he says, remember that we are all members of each other, and he talks about the arguments, and he says, but that's not the way you learned Christ. Yeah. And he just talks about, love each other. And then Jesus is making it clear, you love me, but you love me so much, you've left no room to love each other. And I think we have to sit honestly. We can go down, we can pause that descent down the rabbit hole of indifference by just being honest about where we are. Being honest about where we are and understanding that we cannot afford to lose them. Because what the church doesn't understand is that the more of your young people that you lose is the more of yourself you lose. They don't think there's a correlation between the loss of these people and the loss of their own selves. You know what I mean? Because what they're doing is protecting the message. But no, what you're doing is you're actually devaluing the message. You're devaluing the gospel of Jesus Christ, because the gospel of Jesus Christ is about Christ's action and his love for people. So when you allow yourself to love what Christ said about loving people more than loving the people themselves, you actually devalue not only that message, but you devalue yourself, you know, and you devalue yourself because you devalue the life of that person that you're not reaching out to. So I think we have to sit honestly with where we find ourselves. We have to sit honestly with why we find ourselves there. You know, we have to pull back. We have to admit that we don't know, and that we don't know that we don't know. Not only that we don't know, but we don't know that we don't know. Yeah, we have to actually sit and admit that, like, yeah, we not only don't we know, but we don't know that we don't know, you know. And once you do that, I think we'll pull ourselves away from indifference, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Yeah, when you're indifferent, you no longer are other-centered. And we serve a God who is other-centered. You can't, you know. I said to a group of young people, we had a conference here, and I said, and just over the weekend and a couple of weeks ago, and they invited me in to speak. It was the first live conference we had together. And so they wanted me to speak about Jesus. So I spoke about Jesus from the perspective of way, truth, and life. And the idea that way is a person, truth is a person, life is a person, you know. But especially in terms of truth, you know. And I said last year, one member of the human family, begged the rest of the world to understand that their lives matter. No more, no less than any other member of the human family. But we want you as our Christian brothers and sisters just to see that our lives matter. And I said, and what was the response of the church? We spent more time talking about why, as Christians and as Black Christians, we shouldn't support BLM than actually talk about the fact that, yeah, all right, forget organizations, but what are you going to do about these people who are saying that their lives matter? You've got every critique about the people that are standing in that space, but no critique about what the people are saying. And I said to them, what we want to do is we want to speak truth, but we don't want to be truth. We're eager to go to the world and speak present truth, but we are so unwilling to be truth that is present in the hurting and in the pain of individuals. And I think that's where, when you aren't willing to do that, then yeah, you fall further and further down the rabbit hole of indifference. And you know, we have to have those moments of honesty and trust that once we are honest, that we are not going to be chastised. You know, we're not going to be chastised. We're not going to be berated. That the person is going to just like understand how hard it was for us to be that honest. And they're going to embrace us and say, listen, we're all in this struggle together. We're all in this struggle together, man. Don't trip. Yeah, man. Don't be over anxious. We're all in this struggle together. Because that's what's going to happen. But the longer you choose to be indifferent because of your dishonesty, your lack of self-honesty, is the more that you're going to hemorrhage, the more you're going to lose your sense of who you are, you know, the more you're going to lose your sense. Our church struggles in three places. We struggle with identity. In 2021, Adventism struggles with identity. It struggles with representation, and it struggles with articulation. Those are the three places. Knowing who we are, knowing how to be, and knowing what to say. Those are our three struggles in where we find ourselves now. You know what I mean?
And that's sobering because Frank, and I never forgot his name, and you mentioned him
Frank.
when I saw the workshop.
Mm.
You said, you were doing this workshop, how to be a player, and you highlighted in the book as well. Frank says to you, great presentation, and you say, did it make sense? And he says,
nah, you made sense. Yeah.
You made sense.
You made sense. Yeah. Frank said that to me. Frank said that to me about 18 years ago. Stuck in my mind. Yeah. The culture needs people not who talk sense. We're in a post-truth culture, so people, everything comes out of your mouth. People are already taking it with a grain of salt. And they ain't going to believe it until they see it in your actions. I don't know what the church is missing there. Jesus is making it easier for us. He's making it easier and easier and easier. You know what I mean? Jesus is saying a post-truth culture, brilliant. Now is the best time ever. All right, go and sit with people. Let them see through your actions what kind of fruit is bearing on your tree. But still, so yeah, no one wants to hear people who chat sense. They want to see people whose lives and their words together make sense. That's what they want. That's what they need. Yeah, that's what they need. That's what they deserve. The Father knew that the world deserved that. That's why he sent Jesus Christ. We don't understand that as a church. We have to earn the right to speak the name of Jesus now, because Christianity has done such a hatchet job at destroying the name of Jesus Christ. Serious. You look at evangelicalism right now. People don't want to hear the name Jesus. You know what I mean? Because Jesus is a gun-toting white supremacist who loves seeing children locked in cages on the border. Like, no, it's all right. We're good. We don't need Jesus. We're good. We'll work it out ourselves. The church no longer is looked to as any type of moral authority or moral voice, except amongst those who are themselves just white supremacists, you know what I mean? Or on the other side, they are so liberal that like no one knows what they are. They're just like flypaper. Like no one knows what they are on the other side. No one can recognize that Jesus either. So we have to sit. We have to sit in that place of truth with a culture that deserves it. The culture deserves to see who God is.
Powerful words from my friend, Pastor Eddie Hypolite, and I'm encouraged by the fact that God rescued my friend. I mean, your bio reads living, breathing, walking miracle.
I believe with what I always say, I am the product of the grace of God and a praying mother, man.
Yeah. And I believe what he's done for you, he will do for others. But as you amplified for us, it has to be authentic, man. It has to make sense. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah. Our words and our actions together have to make sense. Yeah, they cannot be. Yeah, they have to go. That's what That's why when at the end of Matthew 7, when he said the people were amazed at the teaching of Jesus because he taught as one who had power, and not as the scribes and the Pharisees. Because the scribes and the Pharisees, every single day they were changing this, changing that. But Jesus, his words and his actions, they were one thing. Yeah. So when they saw him and when they heard him, they're like, yeah. This rabbi has power.
After having my own miracle and getting a promotion over the past week, I came across 1 Kings 8:24. I believe Solomon was praying corporately. And he says, you know what? God speaks words, but his hand is also in the mix.
Yes.
And that confirmed for me that God backs up everything he says.
Yeah,
and
man.
There it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Most definitely.
So, Pastor, please tell us where we can follow your journey, where you're, what you have available.
I am Eddie Hypolite across all my social media. So you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm in those three spaces. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Eddie Hypolite, just Eddie Hypolite in all of those spaces. My resources you can find at actually my business email, at my business website, which is EYRLTD.com, EYRlimited.com. Yeah, EYRlimited.com. You can find my book there. You can find some of my audio resources there. You can find my other book, the Book of Testosteronomy. The book of,
Doc, I'd love to have you back to discuss that book, please.
It's just a book of quotes. It's just a book of quotes.
Yeah.
The Book of Testosteronomy, which is a book I wrote about 4 years ago. No, actually, I wrote 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I wrote for a men's conference that I was holding at my church, so I'd love to come back. And then I'm working on the third book at the moment, which is a devotional journal, a spiritual journal, which is going to be called Believing From Here. Which is going to be called, Living From Here is a kind of philosophical guide. Believing From Here is a spiritual journal, spiritual guide. Yeah.
Awesome. So it's 10:30 something in the evening in the United States, probably.
It's
11,
12, 12:30 in the afternoon, Sunday. Yeah.
What's your soundtrack like on a Sunday in terms of music?
Mercy, on a Sunday, let me see. Well, actually, I was actually listening to some jazz. I was listening to some jazz that I found on this website. But I would like maybe listen to some in crowd. I would listen to some. Oh gosh, I'd listen to some Marley, some Shaka Khan. I'd listen to some Bobby Womack. This one, which is one of my favorites, by Culture. One of my favorite. This is Sunday morning for me.
So, Doc, you're a big Studio One fan.
Oh, man. Yeah, massive Studio One fan. Culture, Stop This Fussing and Fighting. Throw it in with a little Gregory Porter. That's my Sunday. That's my Sunday morning listening.
Doc, thank you so much again, man. You gave us so many nuggets. I'm very appreciative of your work. I want to encourage my listeners to check out the book Living From Here. Biography, a mentor speaking to his young charge, like very authentic, transparent.
Thank you, man.
And you enjoy it along with Pastor Eddie's other offerings. Doc, thank you so much.
Oh, listen, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Ryan. It's truly been a blessing to be in this space with you. Truly appreciate
it, man. And I look forward to having you again. Blessings to you and the family, your wife and daughter as well.
Blessings.
Take care, Doc. Blessings to you.
Bye.
All right.
Not everything can be solved by introspection. And I talk about that in the book, but nothing will be solved if you ain't brave enough to at least take a look. Sometimes you go back into the past, you dig up some bones and you realize, nah, there ain't nothing to be found here. Let me bury this and just leave it and just move on. But sometimes you won't know until you are at least brave enough and strong enough and resilient enough to at least take a look back, so that but you develop that strength in the present so that you can do that. If you consistently live in the past, you won't find the strength in the present to do that. If you consistently live in the future, you won't be able to find the strength. You have to be present with yourself so that you can reach back and you can hope forward, because we're constantly in that same space. We're constantly we're constantly looking to the future. We're constantly reflecting on the past, but it's the present that enables us to navigate both spaces. And so for me, I've learned to just be comfortable with the uncomfortable nature of introspection, and not really business what people think.